Baruch Hashem, Boker Tov. Today's daf yomi is Makkos daf Tes Makkos 9. Today's daf is dedicated for Shemir for the Chayalim, Matzah for the Shviyim and Yeshua for Am Yisrael. So we're going to start on the top of daf Tes Amid Aleph, where we learned in the Mishnah that everybody goes into Ghost. Everybody has to go to a city of refuge if they Rahman al kill a Jew, and a Jew goes into exile if they kill somebody who is kills them, chutz me'al yedei geratoshav, with the exception of the geratoshav. So we'll see what this means. So what is a geratoshav? A geratoshav literally translates as ger is a foreigner and toshav who's living amongst you. So we see from here that if they kill the geratoshav, that they don't go to the city of refuge. So this proves, says the Gemara, Alma geratoshav ove kochanamu. This proves that he's an idolater. This geratoshav is going to be considered like he's an idolater. And so therefore he's not within the rubric of those who have to run to the city of refuge, because he doesn't run in if he kills a non-Jew. He doesn't run to exile if he kills a Jew. And Rashi says it implies that he's excluded from both categories. That he doesn't go into exile if he kills somebody, but rather he is executed, and a Jew does not go into exile for killing him accidentally. So this implies that the geratoshav is treated like an idolater. But Ema Seifa, what's the next clause? Geratoshav gola ayidei geratoshav. But the next clause says that this geratoshav does go into exile for killing another geratoshav accidentally. And we see from here that as well as like the category of a Jew, that if he kills somebody who's his peer accidentally, goes into exile. So which is it? So Amar Kana or Kasha. Kamba Geratoshav Shahara Geratoshav, Kamba Geratoshav Shahara Yisrael. It depends. If the Geratoshav kills a Jew, then he doesn't go into exile, he is executed. But if the Geratoshav kills another Geratoshav, then he runs to the city of refuge. Hikudurami cry adadi. There are those who see this as a contradiction between the verses. Ksiv, it says in the verse that you should set up these city of refuges. You set up these cities of refuge for the Jew and for the foreigner, the ger toshav, who lives amongst them. That's who these cities of refuge should be. Tiana sheish harim v'ksiv, and it also states, these cities shall be for you for a refuge. It means to say it should be a refuge for you, but not for these foreigners. So how do we understand this? So Amarav Kahana Lokasha Kamba Geratoshav Sharik Yisrael Kamba Geratoshav Sharik Geratoshav. Well, one is a Geratoshav who kills a fellow who kills a Jew, so such a person does not go to the city of exile. But a Geratoshav who kills another Geratoshav has to run to the city of refuge. So the Gemara raises a contradiction against this idea. So is it really the case that a Geratoshav who killed another Geratoshav has to go to a city of refuge? Because we learn in the Brisa, it says, therefore, a Geratoshav, an idolater who killed somebody, are executed. Isn't it the same case that the Geratoshav is like the idolater? Just like the idolater, so just like the idolater, it doesn't matter who he kills, even if he kills another idolater, he's going to be executed. So to the Geratoshav, so to the Geratoshav will be executed. It doesn't matter who he kills. So Amrav Chisda will kasha kan shaharag derech yerida kan shaharag shaharag derech aliyah. Well, it depends how he kills. If he kills on the way down, or if he kills it with his upward motion, derech yerida. If he kills in a manner going down, the Yisrael Gali, under which circumstances the Jew would go into exile, because this is considered accidental with negligence. Iunami sagile begolis. So he also go into exile. Derech aliyah. If he kills on the way up, the Yisrael Pater, but if he kills on the way up, that in which case a Jew would be exempt, who nerag, then he will be killed. So the Gemara says this doesn't make sense. So shouldn't we say it's just the opposite? You read just like in the way down to Yisrael, a Jew killed in that manner, he goes into exile. So there too, also the Ger Toshav will be able to go into exile. Derech Aliyah, the Yisrael Potter, nerag, if on the way up, where a Jew would be exempt, would he would be killed for that? Elam Rava, so therefore Rava says we're talking about a different category. But Omer Mutter, so Rava says we're talking about a case where the the Ger Toshav thinks it's actually permitted. There, if he says it's permitted, there he's killed and he doesn't go into exile. That's what we're talking about. Omer Mutter Anu. So Abai says, what are you talking about? If he thinks it was permitted and he killed under those circumstances, then it's a total accident. That's an onus. So he shouldn't for sure not be executed. So Rava responds to Abai, Shani Omer Mutter Karvo Mezeru. So Rava says, no, I disagree with you about that. I'd say if he thinks he was permitted, his Omer Mutter, that's actually Karvo Mezit. That's similar to intentional, and therefore that's why he's killed and he doesn't get to go into exile. But Azdo Tamayo, and they both Abai and Rava, Abai who says he's an Anos and Rava who says he's Karav Amazed if he says Omer Mutter, these opposite approaches, they follow their logic. The Itmar Kasavar Behema Venimtsa Adam Kina Venimtsa Adam Kinani Venimtsa Ger Toshav. So let's say it's a case where a person thinks he's killing an animal, but he ends up killing a human. Or these are like cases of Omer Mutter or Canaanite Venimtsa Ger Toshav. He thinks he's killing a Canaanite, ends up killing Ger Toshav. So Rava says, since this is Omer Mutter, is the case of Karvel Mezid, so he says Chayev. Rava says, under those circumstances, this Ger Toshav is going to be liable for death. And Abai, because, so therefore Rava says Omer Chayev, because it's Omer Mutter, Karvel Mezid. Because the case of where he thinks it's permitted is close to intentional. Whereas Rav Chisda Omer Potter, Rav Chisda says he's exempt because he says Omer Mutter is an onos. He says an Omer Mutter is actually a total accident and he'll be permitted. So the Gemara says, Esvei Rava Rav Chisda. Rava who says Omer Mutter is chayev, he challenges Rav Chisda. He says Hanach Meis Al Isha Sherakachta. It says Sincha Meis Al Isha Sherakachta. It says, I'm going to ask you a question from Avimelech after in the Bible in Genesis chapter 20, and he takes Sarah. She comes to town with Avram, and Avimelech kidnaps her. And then God comes to him in the middle of the night and says, you will die because of the woman that you took. Now, Avimelech is Omer Mutter. He thinks that she's permitted. So he should be an honest. Why is God going to kill him? My love bidei Adam. So isn't this, you're going to die from a man? And this is a proof like that Omer Mutter is chayav misa, you're liable for death. So Hincham Meis al Isha Shalakachta, my love bidei Adam. Where said no bidei Shemayim? No, Rav Chos would say he's going to die from heaven. Dekanami Dachsev. Because it says in the pasuk, it says, because you have sinned against me, mechatoi, and so therefore that will be death from heaven. Otamech, according to your logic, when it says in the pasuk that Joseph says, I don't want to sin with Mrs. Potiphar because of chatasi le'elokim, that I will sin. It'll be a sin against God. Le'elokim lo adam, meaning say it's only a sin against God, not man. And Dino Masar Adam, it means there that he's sinning against God, but the punishment is handed over to man. Al-Khanami Dino Masar Adam. So Rava says, yeah, here too, you're sinning against God, but the punishment will be to man. So the fundamental dispute between Rava and Rav Chisda there. He said Abai Rava. So Abai, who says Omer Mutter is an onus, challenges Rava, who says Omer Mutter is Karav amazing. So what's the dispute? What's the proof? Excuse me, very sorry. It says that Avimelech responds to God and he says, Hagoy gam tzaddik tarog, will you kill also the tzaddik? Meaning to say, he admits to God that he did something wrong, and he says to God, are you going to kill the righteous one? And means to say, he says, I was righteous because I didn't know. And so we see from here, it seems that God admits to his argument, and so therefore we have to say that Omer Mutter is unassuming. The Gemara says, no, Hasam kid kamahadri ilave. No, there God responds to him to his claims, and he doesn't agree to him at all. But he says to him, "Matah shev ki navihu." He says, "Now return this woman, return Sarah back to this man because he is a prophet." But why does he say you have to return him because he's a Navi? Does that make sense? Because he's a prophet, you have to return his wife? That doesn't make sense. Ishis Navi, who did the other, or on top of Testament base, because she is the wife of a prophet, you have to return her. Dolav Navi go to Hader. If she wouldn't be the wife of a prophet, you wouldn't have to return her. That doesn't make sense. Now look at the Amar of Shmuel Bar Nachmani, the Amar of Shmuel Bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonasan. This is what God said to Avimelech, return this woman, return this married woman, because she's regardless. And that what you said, well, you're going to kill me, I'm innocent. You're not so innocent. Who are we? Avimelech says, Avimelech is Mr. Excuses. He said to me, he said, she's my sister. It's nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with me. God says, no, 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 no. Navihu. Navihu. Here the word Navi means he's a chacham. That's how the Ravid explains it. He's a chacham. Udika. And he had to answer this way because he was worried about Geet being killed. He learned from you. Al-Sanai, who Shaboa here. The person who's a guest who comes to the city, so what do you ask him about? Do you ask him you want food to eat or something to drink? No. So all you asked him about was Ishtachazu, Achos Chazu, is this your wife or is this your sister? And that's what we learned that you were going to kill him if he said she was my wife. And the Gemara says, we see from here that a Noahide will be killed for this activity because he should have learned and he didn't learn. That's how Rashi understands it. Anyway, so we continue with the Mishnah. It says the Mishnah, Hasuma Eino Goa, the person who is blind does not go into exile. He is exempt. Rabbi Yehuda and Meir Omer Goa. Rabbi Meir says he does go into exile. Hasone, the one who kills somebody who is his enemy, Eino Goa, he does not go into exile. Rabbi Yossi Omer Hasone Nera. Rabbi Yossi says the one who kills somebody who he hates does go into exile. The Rabbi Yossi says, Hasoni Neharag, the person who kills somebody who he hates, does go into exile. Excuse me, let me start again. Rabbi Yossi Omer Hasoni Neharag, that the Soni is killed, the Mishu Kamuad, because he's warned. He's like a muad, it's like he was predetermined, like he was warned, and he's in violation of the warning. Because it's almost for sure that he killed with intent. So the Gemara says, the Mishnah continues, there are some who kill somebody who they hate to go into exile and some who don't. This is the general rule. Anyone who could say, listen, he killed with intent, then he does not go into exile. But if he killed without intent, then he goes in he goes into exile. We'll look at the Rashi. Any hariga, any execution, you could say that he did it with intent. He doesn't go into exile because he's suspected about it, and it's karav amazing. It's almost like he did it intentionally. But if he did it without intent, and nobody could say that he did it with intent, then he goes into exile. Says the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan, it says in the verse below Ra'us that if you kill without seeing, which means to say that he didn't see him from the beginning. Pratosuma, this comes to exclude a blind man who does not go into exile. Rabbi Meir Omer below Ra'us, or Rabbo says that it says if he kills without seeing, it comes to include a blind man. My time with Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reasoning why Rabbi Yehuda says that if he kills without seeing, he is exempt from exile? Because it says Vasher Yavo Re'el Bayar comes upon his friend in the forest. Afilustuma, that includes even a blind man. Asa, and then Asa Ra'us, and then it comes and says without seeing, no, it excludes the blind man. The mayor, Ra'us, when it says without seeing, that's Lamai. That is to exclude. And Bivlidas, that's also Lamai to exclude. And now we have a concept in the Gemara, you have two exclusions, one exclusion after another, and the Emir Acharmiut El Rabbis are coming to include, and then it's coming to include even the blind man. Rabbi Yehuda B'Vidas Pratam Miskavin Hudasa. It's coming to exclude somebody who kills with Pratam Miskavin Hudasa. Rabbi Yehuda says it's coming to kill somebody who kills with intent. That it's coming to exclude such a case. That means, say, the case of Omer Mutar, and that's what Rabbi Yehuda says, that it's coming to exclude that person. Rabbi Yossi Omer Asone Nerag. Rabbi Yossi says that one who kills somebody who he hates is going to be executed. How could that be? Well, he didn't get warned. So must Nisan Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. So our mission is like Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. Tanya Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda Omer Chaver Enot Tzarach Hasra. That if he's a scholar, he doesn't require a warning. The only purpose for a warning is to distinguish between accidental and intentional. So if he's a scholar, he doesn't require a warning. Rabbi Shimon says, Yesh Sona Goa. Tanya, Kate said, I'm Rabbi Shimon, Yesh Sona Goa, Yesh Sona Shena Goa. So the Brisa says, how does Rabbi Shimon say that there's some who hate to go into exile, some who hate who don't go into exile? Nivsak Goa, Nishmat Eno Goa, that if he's pulling up a barrel and the string breaks, then he goes into exile. It's a total accident, even though the guy was his enemy. But if it slips, he's not an accident at all. And he does not go into exile. But how can we say this? Rabbi Shimon says, the Gemara says, that he never goes into exile, not to Oliver the Sona, until the utensil that he uses to clean the roof slips out of his hand. So we see from here that the only way he goes into exile is when it slips out of his hands. Kosher nifsak on nifsak, kosher nishmat on nishmat. This implies there's a contradiction between nifsak on nifsak, between it breaks, and nishmat on nishmat, because first Brisa says that nifsak goes into exile, and this Brisa says he doesn't. And nishmat doesn't go into exile according to the first Brisa, and this Brisa he does. So the Gemara says nishmat and nishmat will kasha. So the slipping is not a question. That if it's somebody who he likes, then he goes into exile. If it's somebody who he hated, then he doesn't go into exile. If it's like nifsak and nifsak will kasha. That if it breaks, it's also not a contradiction. The second Brisa that says that nifsak does not go into exile, that's Rebbe in our Mishnah, who says in our Mishnah earlier that if the iron slipped out of the wood, and the wood remained in his hand, that is no exile, and so therefore by nifsak he doesn't go into exile unless it entirely slips. Rabbanan, whereas the first Brisa, it says that he goes into exile. That's the position of the Rabbanan who say that if it slips out of the iron slips off, it goes into exile. So too if the barrel breaks. So the Gemara says now, where do they go into exile? Arim Mikwat. They go into the exile to the cities of refuge. Shalosh Shebe'ever Yarden, to the three cities on the other side of the Jordan, or Shalosh Shebe'eretz Canaan, three cities that are in the land of Canaan. As it states, Shalosh Ha'arim Titnu Me'ever Yarden, Shalosh Ha'arim Titnu Be'eretz Canaan. It says in Parashas Matos that you should set up three cities on the other side of the Jordan and three cities in the land of Canaan. Until they set up three cities in the land of Canaan, in the land of Israel, then the other three cities on the other side of the Jordan did not absorb. As it states, Sheish Arei Miklot Tiyana, that the 6 cities of refuge you shall have. Unless all 6 absorbed like once. And you should establish, you need to establish roads. It's not enough to establish cities of refuge. You need to establish roads to be able to get to these cities of refuge. As it says, you should establish the road and you should set up different places for the city of refuge. And you establish that you send with these people who are going to the city of refuge, two Torah scholars, to go with the people who are running to the city of refuge. Shema Yargenu B'derach. Maybe the blood avenger will come upon them on the road. V'yidabru, and they will speak to him. The Torah scholars will convince him. So they don't send with him bodyguards, they send him spiritual bodyguards. Or Meir Omer, Umidaber Ideatzmo. No, the murderer, the one who killed accidentally, will speak on his own to the blood avenger. As it states, these are the words of the person who killed. The word devar here does not really mean words, but that's the way the Mishnah is translating it. The way we start this process is if you kill, either purposely or accidentally, you go to the city of refuge. And the court will send for you and bring him from there. Mishin Itzlam Misa Bebedin, somebody who's obligated for death in the court, Haraguhu, they execute him. Mishalon Itzlam Misa, somebody who's not liable for death in the court, Patruhu, they exempt him. Mishin Itzlam goes, and somebody who's obligated to go into exile, Machziron Osolem Komo, they return to his place. And it says, Yeshivu Oso Haidal Ir Mekoto. The community shall return him to his city of refuge. Tanrabanan Shalosh Arim Hivdil Moshe Be'ever Yardim. Moshe separated 3 cities on the other side of the Jordan. Connect and Hivdil Yoshua Beretz Canaan. Corresponding to that, Joshua set up 3 in the land of Canaan. These cities were corresponding to each other. They were opposite each other like 2 lines in a vineyard. Chevron Yehuda Keneged Betzer Bamidbar. Chevron in Judah was corresponding to Betzer in the Midbar. Shechem Bahar Ephraim is Keneged Remote Shabbat Goai. Kedesh Bahar Naphtali, Kedesh and mountain of Naphtali was corresponding to Goan Babashan. Vishilah shall divide up the border. She'u Mishu Hashem means say that they're each 1/3 away from each other. She'ehei Midarom Hebron, that the place from the south of Israel until Hebron was like Hebron to Shlem, meaning the whole land was divided into 4 parts, into quarters. Hebron was Shlem, Mishlem Kedesh, and Mishlem Kedesh, Kedesh Litzafon. So that's how it was divided. The Gemara says, Be'ever Yarden Tlas, Beretz Yisrael Tlas, it means the entire Ever Yarden has 3. And there's only 2.5 tribes there, whereas the entire land of Israel, where there's many more tribes, is also 3. Amar Abaye explains, but Gilad Shchichei wrote some, because in Gilad there were a lot of murderers, and that's why you needed more cities of refuge proportionally to the number of people than you have in the land of Israel. And how do we know that? Because it says Gilad Kiryas Boy Aven Akuba Midam. What does it mean that in Gilad, which is the other side of the Jordan, it was a city of sinners, Akuba Dam. What is Akuba Midam? Amar Rabbi Elazar, Shayu Okvin, La'arog Nefashos. That they were lying in ambush to kill people. Maishna Meha Gisa, Meha Gisa Demrachki, Maishna Mitzi Demikarvi. So how come, if you see that it's divided into 4, so then the cities on the bottom and the top, they are going to be farther away from the people who live all the way in the bottom will have to travel farther to their first city than the people who live in the middle. So Abaye explained, but also in Shlem, which was in the middle, there were a lot more murderers. So therefore, they need to be closer to a city of refuge. As it states, what does it mean, my Chaver Kohanim? That they would make alliances to kill people. Like Kohanim who gather together to collect truma on the threshing floor. Okay, this is today's daf yomi, beautiful daf, some powerful ideas. We see from here that the biggest strength, the biggest body part a person could have is the Torah scholars who accompany them on the road.